All right, hey, I'm Dr. Chris Warzilla. This is my current intern, Frankie Sadia, and he was in the PED 386 class that came out to my school and did a field experience here. So what that means is they came out and planned for and taught 2 lessons a week for the semester. Except, of course, last spring our semester got cut short, so they were only able to come out here, I think, about 5 or 6 weeks, which is too bad because it's a really great experience to get out there teaching real live kids. So Frankie has progressed to his internship and is hoping to become a physical education teacher after this, or go on to graduate school, whatever he chooses to do. Maybe he'll go into the military. Not quite sure. Uh, all right, so Dr. Elliott asked me to do a video about my experiences with EdTPA. And EdTPA is now the national evaluation system for all interns. And it's tough, people. It's really tough. They started with a pilot program first, UNCW, I'm pretty sure. And in 2018, one of my interns, Ashley, and you'll see her lesson plan uh, in as one of the assignments. But Rebecca Ashley Hall, um, she went through the pilot program, and Ashley was a very good student, and she wrote really well. She was an excellent student teacher. I mean, she was excellent, following all aspects of management and instruction. She was really, really good, and she actually only passed 2 out of 3 of her parts of the EdTPA. But that's not saying anything because I've had a couple of interns since then who one passed the whole thing and did well with that, so I was happy about that. And in fact, he got the highest mark in out of all the PE interns that semester. So, and I really thought Ashley was just as good or better a student as this other student. Anyway, saying that, EdTPA it's tough. It's a 3-part test. First part is instruction and language. That language is hard to understand. You really have to dive deep into that to know what all those types of languages they're talking about that you have to prove that you're using in your lesson plans. Second part is videotaping and then analyzing the videotape. And then the third part is your use of assessments. So I will go back to EdTPA is tough. Okay, I liken it to national board certification, which I underwent and have been recertified to be a national board teacher, and you're only allowed to do that after 3 years in the field. So initially, the national board certification, the success rate is not even really great, and people have to retake one or more parts. So if you do not pass the EdTPA, you are allowed to retake some of the parts or rewrite some of the parts, as far as I know. But of course, that's a question for someone like Rebecca Clark or Kit Helskamp, Dr. Helskamp. All right, so a couple. Here's a picture of one of my interns, and this is how she tried to get herself organized. She wrote out all the different parts of the EdTPA, and we put it up on the board, and we had due dates, etc., and she was able to get it in on time. You really have to plan on doing this EdTPA. You really have to put a lot of thought and planning into it. And I always tell my interns, make sure you do your lesson plans before you go out to your intern site. Did that help you out, Frankie?
Yes, sir. A lot.
It
Saved
did.
a lot of time.
Because you have to do three to five detailed lesson plans. And when you look at Rebecca Hall's examples, and the other one was Zach Saunders, he did a swimming example for your EdTPA lesson plan examples that are in your module. And they are very detailed. In fact, I think Rebecca's was Was it 14 pages long? Unbelievable. You know, and they're very detailed. They're very detailed. So if you think you're going to come out to the intern site and exposed to everything that you have to do as an intern, and then do your lesson plans on top of that, that's a mistake, people. I'm telling you, it's a mistake. You need to do your lesson plans before you get out to the site. And of course, there's a little research involved with doing the lesson plan. You have to have the right format, and again, Rebecca Clark is the one to help you out with that. You have to have the right template, and then you have to choose what you want to teach. So I asked Frankie beforehand what he wanted to teach, and he had to come up with something that is applicable to our school. For one, do we have that equipment? Right now we're in social distancing. Are we going to be able to do that by social distancing, etc.? And other considerations are, we are a K through 5 school. Is the unit that he teaches going to be applicable to a K through 5 school? And in this case, go ahead, Frankie. Tell us, you picked tennis. Why?
Mainly because it's a sport that you can play all your life, and the younger you get started on it, the better you become. Good little activities, keep you exercise.
Right, and tennis is one of those things that not a lot of students are familiar with or have skills in. So everyone's starting on the same foot. We have other sports like soccer and basketball and football and baseball, softball. These sort of sports students have experience in. Some of them are on traveling teams, etc. And so they're really good. So that means they might take over the class or dominate or detract from teaching the other kids in class the sport and activities. Okay, so everyone starts on the same level. That's why I love teaching frisbee, because everyone starts on the same level. There's no superstars right away. Anyway, so we did have all the equipment because we got a grant several years ago for all the tennis stuff. So we're using modified tennis rackets for the K5. They are lighter and shorter. And Frankie's been using balloons for actually what, K through 2? K through 3 even sometimes.
Yeah, K through 3.
And then 4th and 5th grade, they had the modified tennis ball, which is a ball that doesn't bounce as much. Okay, that way kids aren't, running all over the gym trying to get their ball that's getting away from them every other second of their life.
In the 4th grade and 5th grade, they use a balloon on the third part because it's just easier for them to learn with.
Yeah, so we really try to modify and adapt our instruction. And all that's important because you have a big written commentary also with your lesson planning. Not only do you have to find out about what type of students do we have in this school, and all our EC and IEPs and all that other stuff, but you have to realize that we are always constantly adapting for age and ability level. Okay, so that's planning and the language. So the second part is actually videotaping. And again, videotaping is a bear. It really is, because it never goes right. Never goes right. Okay, so when you're actually ready to videotape, make sure you've already had about 3 or 4 or 5 practice sessions videotaping. Things that can go wrong are camera angle, the microphone is no good. You have someone being a real big behavior problem. Your lesson bombs possibly. Anything can happen. There's a fire drill right in the middle of it. Anything can happen during a lesson. So you try to get as much experience and practice videotaping. Even after you get the videotape, that's when your problems really start. Go ahead, tell us about your experience.
The first day, let's just say they weren't doing the activity at all correct. Then I had problems with iPads, had to get them all straightened out. They had many questions, some little behavior problems with certain individuals. And grouping was kind of a bad idea because you get two of the wrong individuals together, and that just creates mayhem.
Really does. Yeah. So make sure you have plenty of tape, videotape, to choose from when you actually submit your videotape. I think you're allowed. Is it 2 segments or 3 segments? What is it?
It's 2 videos that can together can be no more than 20 minutes.
Right. So you really have to, because they ask a lot and they want you to go very in depth in the rubrics that they're grading you by when you're writing up your analysis of your videotape. So make sure you have some good film. So of course you have rubrics for everything. So you have 5 rubrics for planning, which I didn't touch on, and you can look at. But let's look at the instruction rubrics. So the videotape and rubrics, what you're going to be graded on. There's 5 of them also. The first one is learning environment. They're going to be asking you about your learning environment when you videotape. So that means everything is safe, clean, working. It's positive. There's a nurturing environment. Well, I didn't see Frankie yelling and screaming at anybody. That wouldn't be good, right? But you have to have a good relationship with your students, non-threatening atmosphere, safe atmosphere. And just as an example, we were talking yesterday, and we talked before Frankie actually began teaching this unit, like what type of racket to use with who, or what type of paddle to use with who. And we said, like, we even use ping pong paddles for the kindergarten and first grade, because they have less control, and if they have a long-handled paddle or implement, they can smack somebody across the head easily. And not only K1, but 2, 3, 4, 5 also. But hopefully as the kids get older, they'll have a little bit more restraint and control. And we enforce the rules so that they don't go swinging when they're right next to somebody, swinging out of control. So the learning environment has to be positive, has to be safe. Engaging students in learning is your next rubric for instruction or videotaping. Are your students being engaged? Is everyone engaged doing what they're supposed to be doing? In Frankie's tennis lesson, he had one person doing the assessment, the pen and paper assessment, and he had one person videotaping, and he had one person doing the actual skill. So all those 3 are actually engaged, even though all 3 weren't engaged in physical things. They were involved in cognitive things and affective working as a team. All right, the next rubric would be strengthening student competencies. Are the students getting better because of your instruction? So, if you're giving feedback during quality practice time, that's when the most learning occurs. And if you're giving good demonstrations so the kids have a visual, that's where learning is going to occur, because kids learn by seeing. And then if you correct their mistakes, their major mistakes first, then they should be able to learn the skill, because after all, people, this isn't rocket science.
It's for some.
Oh my goodness. All right, the next one would be subject-specific pedagogy. Wow. How are you supposed to prove that in a 20-minute tape? What does that even mean? Subject-specific pedagogy. Can you teach this lesson using the vocabulary and the skills to do it? Some people are just not tennis players. And so if you're not a tennis player, you better have a different means to teach the class. I know way back when, and we're talking K5 now, but way back when I was a grad assistant, I taught a college tennis class. I had played some tennis in my life. I could actually serve the ball and rally and volley and do all that, but I never played competitive tennis. So, and here I was teaching a college tennis course. So what did I do? I brought in my experts. I brought in players from the tennis team. I would like to say I used YouTube videos, but we're talking the 1980s, people. They weren't even around by then, so I had to do something. I will tell you that I did very little physical tennis myself. I always either picked students or had some experts come in to demonstrate the skills. Then I put them in their situations, and then I went around detecting and correcting errors and giving specific feedback. So there you go. And then, so Frankie played high school tennis, so he's a good tennis player. So he was able to uh, utilize his experience in teaching the sport. All right, rubric number 10 altogether is analyzing teacher effectiveness. And there's several ways you can do this. The way I like to do it, and if you were ever in my classes, I have a handout called Teaching in a Nutshell. So each one of the components of Teaching in a Nutshell, we go over and we look at and we talk about. And if you can do these components well, then your teacher effectiveness should be pretty high. I also have some experience in the past of doing different systematic observation systems. Some of you might know the MIA sheet. That's management, instruction, and activity for PE. So how much time you spend on management, how much time you spend on instruction, and how much time you spend on activity. And of course, activity should be way high, a high percentage. There's also another observation sheet called the QMTPS. It's a pretty famous one from Dr. Judy Rink, and that's the Qualitative Measures of Teacher Performance Scale. And it's based on my handout that I give, the Teaching in a Nutshell handout, where you are looking at management of time, people, space, and equipment, and task presentation or instruction. And that is how you open a lesson, your demonstration and cues, your practice and feedback, your student achievement, and then closing the lesson. So if you can do all those and do them well, each component well, your teacher effectiveness should be pretty good. That brings us to the third part of the EdTPA. Oh my goodness. This is a more or less 10-page paper. What is it?
Let's see.
I think it's a 10-page paper on the assessments that you used for your lesson. That's a bear. So,
and not only that, we're the only one field that we were talking about, where you actually have a video for each of your specific individuals. So you gotta have three: one low, one high, one medium, and you gotta actually have a video of them doing the assignment as well, the assessment.
That's right. So Frankie had to pick out three, and we talked about it. We'll pick out a high, a medium, and a low performer, and then one more also, and then one additional one.
Well, no, it's just because of the activity tomorrow.
Okay.
That's the reason for that.
So for his lesson, basically his lesson was this: students were standing inside a big hula hoop with a paddle, and they had a balloon and a like a sponge ball, like a yarn ball. Okay, so they had, I think, 4 tasks altogether. One was called the bump up, where you bump the balloon using your paddle. See how many times you can do that. Another one was tossing the balloon up and trying to catch it on the paddle. Another one was tossing it up and spinning the paddle. And another one was tossing it up and doing a big circle and then bopping the balloon back up. So if you were able to do those pretty well, you're allowed to use the yarn ball and try it like that. So you had one person doing the activity, one person doing the assessment sheet. It was a pen and paper assessment sheet on a clipboard, and then you had one person doing the videotaping. So let's look at and then he was going around with his own assessment sheet, or was supposed to be doing that. Now, can you imagine trying to get all that together and hoping it comes out right? and you're on a deadline because you got to submit the video along with about 30 pages of written work for your Ed TPA and teach 6 classes a day. Can you imagine that?
And the last commentary is 10 pages.
And the
Single
last,
space.
that's right. So let's look at the assessment rubrics. There's 5 of them, of course. There's 15 rubrics altogether. 5 in the first part, 5 in the second, 5 in the third. The third part is assessment. So the first rubric is you're supposed to write about the analysis of student learning. So Frankie had 2nd grade students, 3 of them working in a group together, except all of a sudden his last group had 4, so what did he do? So he split them into 2. So altogether I think he had 5 or 6 groups altogether, most with 3 and then a couple with 2. So that's something you have to do on the fly because you can't plan for how many students are going to show up at your door. You can try to plan. You can go and ask how many to teach you, but you're working all day long too. Things happen quick in a school. You have to be ready to modify and adapt at a moment's notice. So he put them into their groups and got them going the first day, and it was a mess, to be honest, because the rubric, how to fill out a rubric for a 2nd grade student who's never really done that before, you can't just assume that they're going to be able to do it. So that didn't work. You can't assume that a 2nd grade student knows how to do the video part of an iPad. You can't assume it. So that didn't work. It was a little bit of a mess. And the third part was doing these little skills. To be honest, the students didn't have very much skill at all. Period. So the skills were kind of bombing. So what we did was just stop, realize what we had to change. We worked on it the next day. Before we even did any filming, Frankie put them in front of the projector. He put the rubric up there. He went over how to fill out an assessment sheet as a kid. Only one girl had a question or two, which is pretty good for her because she's a 2nd grade kid asking some good questions about how to fill out the rubric. That was good. And then he showed them once again what they had to do inside the hula hoop, and then he showed them exactly how to work the video camera. So theoretically, that should do it, right? Yes and no, because some of them were able to do it, and some of them it was over their heads. So that's a part of the learning process, and now we have to adjust for that. So Frankie wants to stay with 2nd grade. That's fine. Part of the reason probably is it takes probably 3 weeks or a month to collect all the video permission slips from the students. So in order to go through that again, no, we ain't got no time for that. So all that has to, and when you do your Ed TPA, you will see that that's the case. All right, so we learned a lot from this lesson, let me tell you what. Providing feedback to guide learning is your next rubric. And all these rubrics are in the Making Good Choices document that's on the Watson School of Ed TPA site. So, providing feedback, Frankie, I told him, you need to go around, correct the main errors to everybody. And so he did. He circulated around. He was telling kids what they needed to correct based on the cues that he had given. And that's good. Got to correct the main errors first. So he should score pretty high on this, because on his videotape he went around and you can hear him telling kids to keep your paddle square and don't hit it so hard, nice and easy taps, etc. So he was saying the hula hoop. So he was using the language too, so that's going to help him when he writes about language. Student understanding and use of feedback. Did they understand? Did they correct their errors when he told them to? Yes and no. We're dealing with 2nd grade kids here. They're a little bit all over the place, to be honest. You know, you really have to make sure your management of people is good. People in space. Uh, did they get it? Some of them got it. Some of them got it. Some of them were able to do the activities. Some of them no. All right.
They wanted to do their own thing.
Some want to do their own thing, you know, and yet you're one person going around trying to help out 20 kids learn how to do these activities. Welcome to teaching PE, right? All right, next rubric. Analyzing students' language use and physical education learning. This is going to be tough because they're supposed to be using the language that he used with them. So, like, he did some check for understanding questions like, what's the name of the grip? And they were able to say the handshake grip. That's using the language. But, you know, when we look at this video, I'm just hoping he's going to be able to get some of that student language from that 12 minutes of video that he selected so far. And saying that, you know, we still have one more video clip that we have to make. We're going to be videotaping his demonstration and cues tomorrow. So hopefully he's going to be able to work some language in and try to get some language back from them by asking check for understanding questions so that he can say, look, this is where they're using the language. Because otherwise he's not going to score high on that rubric. And then finally, using assessment to inform instruction is your last rubric. And we just talked about this a little bit. We knew what we had to change after that first day. So we did. You have to modify and adapt your instruction. So this Ed TPA, when you do your internship, you need to stay on top of it. I'm talking everyday action because all of a sudden it's due. And if you don't get it in, well, then you're doubly screwed, aren't you?
And just to mention, Watson pays the $300 that it costs to submit it. But if you have to do a retake, that's $100 per section.
Oof.
And that's out of your pocket.
That's right. All right, so to wrap this up, the biggest thing I can say is that if you take EdTPA lightly, you're not going to be able to do it. This is a process that needs to be done every day. The biggest thing I can tell you is get a good example of an EdTPA lesson plan and do your lesson plans before you go to your site. That is the biggest thing I can tell you. And from there, it's just a process. You got to work on it every day. You can't leave it to the last minute. That's it. EdTPA. Good luck with it. I'm so glad I don't have to do it.